Hello and welcome to Sustainability Squad, your go-to podcast for anything sustainable development in Sub-Saharan Africa. It's a pleasure to have you in this session. Today we'll be looking at energy transition in the region in Sub-Saharan Africa and how it affects community development and sustainable development in general in the region. First of all, I would want us to look at what exactly energy transition is, what it means to us as African, and what it could mean to African countries in terms of their economy and overall growth and development. All right, before I define what energy transition means, let us first of all look at why it is important to even have energy transition, why we should be looking at transitioning to greener energy. It is no longer news that the world is faced with a lot of crises, one of which is climate crisis due to fossil burning of fossil fuel and some other human-made issues that's affecting the overall temperature or climate of the world. So, climate change, to ensure that we combat climate change effectively, countries are beginning to transition to solar energy, wind energy, and hydroelectric power. And in general, looking for cleaner sources of energy instead of burning coal or fossil fuel and the rest of it. So, what then is energy transition? What do we mean when we say we want to transition? Simply means moving from this former kind of energy generation that we had to something greener, something more sustainable, and something generally healthier, both for us and for the climate. So that is what we mean by energy transition. And now let's quickly look at the benefits. How is it going to benefit us as a people, as a continent, and as a nation? And yeah, come on with me. Let's have a look at that. So, first of all, in sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of countries still have communities and cities where the people do not have access to steady power supply. I am Nigerian and we still face that to start with. And I know some other communities across the continent still do not even have access at all, let alone a steady one. So if we are able to transition to greener energy, let's say solar, chances are that people will have more access to affordable and steady electricity, considering that Africa has loads of sunlight. You see, we have the natural resources to generate this energy, to generate this power in the tone and magnitude, or should I say quantity, that we need it. So another one is we can also look at creating job opportunities and leading to economic growth. When countries in developing countries, especially those in Africa, which is where our focus is, embrace this and bringing about green energy technologies, it will definitely create jobs because people will be trained in these skills, people will be employed to do this, and it will be expanding the scope of jobs available to the people. One country that is already doing so well in or reasonably well in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of renewable energy is South Africa. They've put in a level of investment into this aspect of energy transitioning, championing renewable energy in a reasonable scale, and it's something that other African countries should actually pay attention to because they have the sun. Why not make use of it? You see, so. Another benefit that we can have on when we transition to greener energy is environmental sustainability. Many people make the argument that Europe has developed and now it's time for Africa to develop. And the world is suffering climate change due to um, fossil fuels already and carbon emission from the Western world. So why stand in the way of other part of the world, like from developing by burning fossil fuel? The thing is, whether we agree or not that climate change is happening, it is happening and it is affecting everybody. And if we can afford to do better, why not? If we lose nothing in doing better, why not do better? So globally, we are even most disadvantaged in sub-Saharan Africa when you talk about environmental sustainability, because we lack the resources, to combat whatever challenge or trouble that may arise due to lack of environmental sustainability. So when we transition to greener energies, we'll be helping to cut down carbon emission, we'll be helping to promote cleaner air by reducing emissions, and we'll be helping to, in general, provide power, like I mentioned earlier, which will help people to produce in a more sustainable way. So when you bring in renewable energy, which will have the resources, and look into it properly, install it, and get people to use it, it will definitely lead to more access to electricity across communities, more production, like we mentioned, and it will, in overall, looking at it in a larger scale, lead to more sustainable community development. So, aside these benefits, we also have a number of challenges that has been a bane or a challenge to transitioning successfully or easily into greener energies in the region. One will look at its infrastructural deficit. So most countries in sub-Saharan Africa do not have the infrastructure to seamlessly transition to greener energies. What do I mean by this? As it is, they do not have reliable and sustainable grid to bring this on board. So there will be need for a lot of investment and planning into their grid to be able to bring in sustainable energy in a way that will not even lead to the collapse of the grid they already have, and that will also that will also help to create wholesome distribution of energy or power to people in their respective communities. So another issue is financial barriers. Many renewable energy facilities and infrastructure require some kind of upfront payment, which often can be huge, and governments and institutions may struggle to come up with this, kind of money, and that is where innovative planning and finding a strategy to raise these resources becomes very important, and where we could also look at international aid in to access it in a way that it's useful for the countries or for the region, and not just to receive aid as we have for over 60 years and not be able to account for what we have used it for. When we look at it, you ask, so after 60 years or after about 50, depending on the country, of receiving aid, and we can for sure say that we've solved this problem. So that's not what I mean by aid. So when you, well, it's something that can be helpful here if well done. So another issue that we have is policy, regulation, and framework. This is a major one. So in terms of policy, that is where I always have like That's when most African countries get it wrong, because there is no continuity in government. It also affects policy. One president comes in and goes for A, and after 4 8 years, the next president comes in and goes for Q, something absolutely different from the other A, without looking at how do we progress as a nation, not as a person. So leaders, most leaders who come in and just like change the policy, they make it difficult for people to invest, to have faith and invest in these areas. There are people, individuals or foreigners that could invest and actually help bring about green energy, transitioning into cleaner energy and coming about steady power supply. But people will people do not have that faith to make such huge investment when they do not trust that a policy will at least remain as it is or improve in the line that it already is, without like going kaboom, which is like a major issue. So policy and regulatory frameworks, we need to work on that. We Serious attention needs to be paid, in terms of policy and regulatory framework, in seeing when we want to see green energy transition to green energy happen. We need to look into policy and regulatory framework, and we need to look into the sustainability of those policy. So, lastly, some people believe that there's an issue of social acceptance, people resisting greener energy and going for what they already know. But from my experience, I don't think that's going to be much of an issue in the region, because one thing is when something work, people tend to like go for it. Again, another thing that may bring about resistance could be cost. I mean, for someone who has not eaten, to pay hugely to have access to an energy or a kind of energy generated by the sun or the water body in their community, or that is how they would look at it. So for this to be generally accepted, proper community engagement has to happen, and governments and institutions pushing or championing this, and individuals championing this, need to see that this greener energy gets to people at an affordable rate, you know, where they can still afford it and be able to attend to other needs of life that they have. But if the price or the cost is like over the roof, there will definitely be resistance, because people will not generally, go for something more expensive than what they had without good reason and without proper education on why that is important. So, to conclude, while I agree that energy transition in sub-Saharan Africa has loads of challenges, and we've also seen the benefits, I believe strongly I believe strongly in taking one step at a time. If government institutions decide to make it a priority and genuinely act on it, they will take one step at a time until we achieve the result that we want to achieve. We can decide to focus on the challenges and the problems and dwell therein and not move forward. Or we can take one step at a time, like starting with the street lights. Instead of powering the street lights, for instance, with diesel and the fossil fuels, we can start with the street lights. Change the street lights to solar powered. It's I think it's the least we can do, at least in cities, and gradually move into doing more. So Thank you very much for joining or for watching this today. And I look forward to our next session when we'll have someone in with me to discuss another aspect of sustainable community development in Sub-Saharan Africa. In the meantime, thank you and see you in the next one. Bye.